Tonight, in this special edition of Frontline, two stories from Egypt. First, inside the youth movement behind the uprising.
These young people in Cairo, they launched this group, which swelled to 70, 80,000 people in a matter of weeks.
And how its weapon, the internet, caught the Mubarak regime off guard.
These pictures spread like wildfire on Facebook.
The video of someone being beaten and tortured and killed is incredibly powerful.
So this was a moment for Generation Facebook to understand what it means to live under the Mubarak regime.
And ignited a revolution.
It wasn't just youth, it wasn't just the middle class. You had it across Egypt.
Then in our second story, the Muslim Brotherhood.
We're talking about the largest opposition force in Egypt by far. No one really comes close.
Long demonized by Mubarak to inspire fear of Islamic extremism.
Does America understand the Muslim Brotherhood?
The U.S. doesn't understand the Muslim Brotherhood.
Frontline correspondent Charles Sennett of Global Post examines the Brotherhood's potential role in the new Egypt.
It is the young members which are telling the old guard what to do, and they are trying to catch up, and they are not catching up.
Tonight on Frontline, revolution in Cairo. Before they filled Liberation Square in Cairo, down a side street, in a small office, they are planning a revolution. They call themselves the April 6th Youth Movement. They have a list of demands and a plan, a national protest, fueled by the internet. Ahmed Mar is their leader.
Ahmed Maher is a civil engineer, almost compulsively quiet, compulsively limelight avoiding young guy, but very tech savvy.
David Woolman from Wired magazine has been reporting inside April 6th movement and watching Mar use the web to spread anti-government messages to eager young Egyptians.
In the real world, these governments are good at suppressing assembly. But short of shutting off the internet, the government really can't prevent the people from communicating and convening in this new and incredibly powerful way.
Mar was plugged into a network of activists determined to expose the repression in the Mubarak regime.
What happened in Egypt in the last few years was that a lot of bloggers were just filming police brutality on mobile phones.
The power of a video of seeing in action someone being beaten and tortured and killed is incredibly powerful. It's something that probably words it can't convey in the same sense.
Egyptians saw something new and shocking. Graphic images of brutal interrogations taken by the security police.
It depicts an Egyptian citizen being tortured and sodomized inside an Egyptian police station. But I personally have published like almost over a dozen of these videos, and only very few of them have been investigated.
The movement was born back in 2008 during the planning for a textile workers' strike on April 6th. Ahmed Mar used Facebook and YouTube to organize a national protest.
The April 6th Facebook page said, "We call on all Egyptians to go on strike." And from then on, their page became incredibly popular.
60% of Egypt's population is under 30. Even with access to university education, many are unemployed. They seemed ready to be radicalized.
These young people in Cairo said, how can we support this? And they launched this group, which, as we know now, swelled to 70, 80,000 people in a matter of weeks. And this caught the regime by surprise.
But on April 6, 2008, the day of the strike, Egyptian security police struck back. They killed 4 protesters and jailed 400 others. Before long, they had tracked down Ahmed Mar.
كان ضرب كله بايديهم في دماغي وضرب على قفايا وضرب على ظهري كده.
He was beaten by the security forces.
بعد كده كان الأسئلة كلها على ناس أعضاء في جروب الفيسبوك.
He says his torturers wanted to know about a virtual friend named Fatima.
ما عرفهاش فيس تو فيس، عضو في الجروب.
They didn't seem to understand that she wasn't a friend in real life.
He was taken in and beaten so that he could give the police the password for the Facebook group when there was no password all along. So that just shows you just how clueless the regime and its security apparatus was.
ولا احنا ممكن نعمل فيك نغتصبك ونجيب عصاية وندخلها وحاجات زي كده.
Mar gave the security police a false password. He was released.
When he is finally released and is back online, you see this feeling of new energy and new anger about the treatment of the people and about the suppression and about the regime. And so this galvanizes the movement. Maher then has more currency because now he's been tortured and he's back at it. And a lot of people I spoke with, they really describe him as the everyman hero.
It took 3 more years. Mar and April 6th slowly built a base. They had begun planning by learning from others.
They would talk about Mandela, they would talk about Serbia, and they were taking notes. And because of the internet, they were reading about these things.
They studied the Serbian student movement, Otpor, meaning resistance. Using highly disciplined, nonviolent tactics, the students had successfully toppled Slobodan Milosevic. Sergej Popovic was the leader of that revolution. He shared his experience with the April 6th group.
One of the key things is to understand that the nonviolent struggle is a form of warfare, because violence contaminates your movement and creates your opponent excuse for using police and military forces. Also, there is this big problem with media and violence. If you have a march of 100,000 people and one single idiot throwing stone, he's going to be the star of the day.
The Serbian example highlighted the fact that movements don't need to be violent, especially in Mubarak's Egypt. I mean, violence will backfire. The police are incredibly violent.
اولا دربنا في صربيا دربنا على فكره ان احنا ايه هو مفهوم العنف ازاي نقدر
Mohammed Adel had been to Serbia to learn the techniques.
ازاي ان احنا نقدر نساوي دوت نقدر نتحكم في الناس نقدر ننظم مسيرات وفعاليات كويسه.
An extraordinary act of daring in the country of Tunisia.
The President Ben Ali has stepped down.
Then Tunisia broke, and as protesters there overthrew their government, Mar and the April 6th activists saw their chance.
This was their moment, and they saw it happen, and they jumped online, they jumped on SMS, they jumped on Twitter, and they had each other accessible, 30, 40, 50,000 people right away in this forum.
They set a date, a public holiday, January 25th, and issued a call for action.
Asma Mahfouz, a young activist with the April 6th movement, decided to film a vlog to encourage Egyptians to join protests on January the 25th, Police Day.
عايزين ننزل يوم 25 لو لسه عندنا ننزل نطالب بحقنا كبني ادمين كل واحد في البلد دي شايف نفسه راجل يبقى ينزل.
The video went viral. The morning of the 25th, Mar and April 6th waited to see if anyone would show up.
They have no idea if 3 people are going to turn up or 300 or 3,000. They're just doing their best to be heard and to be convincing in cyberspace. And so they really don't know what's going to happen, what will be the turnout.
From the balcony of the April 6th office, they saw it begin. In Egypt, this holiday is called Police Day.
اصلا كان يوم 25 احنا بنعمله كل سنه، بيعملوا 25 يناير بيعملوا كل سنه حاجه ساخره من الشرطه. عملنا بيان وزعناه في الشارع ان ده ازاي يحتفلوا بالبلطجيه والحراميه واللي بيساعدوا على التزوير والكلام ده كله. ولكن ما حدث في تونس غير المسار بالكامل.
I heard about April 6th from Facebook. I'm not into politics. I wanted to do something for my country, something positive. That's the happiest day in my life.
Then the security police. They try the nonviolent tactics imported from Serbia. They hold their hands up in compliance. They salute and even hug the police. On this day, it seems to work. They move toward Tahrir Square.
The uprising started with these protests on January the 25th, but then it reached everyone else. It became much bigger than just social media and the invitation on social media. It became something that galvanized all Egyptians.
At April 6th headquarters, producer Elizabeth Jones began capturing the first days of what they were starting to call the revolution.
اقرب حاجه ليك مصر القديمه، جامع عمرو في مصر القديمه.
Mar is already coordinating the next big protest.
لو في حاجه ممكن نستمر في ضغوطنا المستمره من اجل ان احنا نحصل تغيير حقيقي، مش مجرد وعود زي كل وعود، لازم يحصل تغيير حقيقي. الناس مش تخرج من الشارع غير لما يحصل تغيير حقيقي في مصر.
A lot of it is really about this innovation. Every night they think about, what can we do next? What can we call an event? The tweet that went around the world, or the million-person march, or the Day of Rage. They're innovating. They're creating.
By now, tens of thousands have joined the protests. Clashes have begun with the security police. There have been arrests, including April 6th spokesman Mohammed Adel.
مجرد ان الامن شافني في العربيه، نزلني من العربيه ونزل فيا طحن. الامن نازل فيا بيطحني بالبوكس وبالعصيان. كان في اسماعيل الشاعر مدير امن القاهره نزل فيا ضرب، قال لي خدوه على العربيه. غير كده كمان اضافي الضباط في الشارع كله ظابط يشوفني، عملتوا ثوره، بقيتوا زي تونس، خلي الفيسبوك ينفعكم.
Mar tries to handle organizing for as many as 100,000 Egyptians who could hit the streets the next day.
يوم اتوقع انه اكبر بكتير من يوم ال 25 لان الحشد كبير جدا على الانترنت وعلى الرسائل، وحتى الناس في الشارع بتتكلم بصوره كبيره، وهيبقى خروج من مساجد كتير في القاهره وفي المحافظات، هيبقى العدد كبير يعني في مناطق شعبيه ويتجمعوا برضه عمليات تحرير، بس اتوقع ان يكون عدد اكبر بكتير من يوم الثلاث.
In the morning, their plan is to walk from the mosques through the square directly to the presidential palace. At dawn, the police move into the city. At April 6th headquarters, because of the previous day's violence, they decide to name this march the Day of Rage. Then the government retaliated.
كان عندي شبكه وقطع، انتوا بنقابلينا بساعتين، احنا قطعنا الساعه 10 11.
Mobile phones and the internet, the key organizational tools, were taken down.
When Mubarak shut off the internet, it really revealed the desperation on the part of the regime about what was happening and about how effectively the protesters were using the tools of social media.
But even without the internet, the organizers continued to work.
They're not just online activists. They have boots on the ground. They have connections to other, experienced activists.
They'd learned from the Serbian students and the Tunisians. Wearing homemade armor, they are prepared for another day in the streets.
I think it's a nice combination of people who know how to use the internet and are web savvy and also have real experience with street protests and trying to organize them.
جمع الناس في مسيرات سلمية هتتجه لميدان التحرير من كذا منطقة، حوالي 4 مناطق بس من المناطق الشعبية جدا، من الطبقة اللي هي فقيرة جدا من الناس، عشان هي دي الطبقة اللي حاسة بالمشاكل الاقتصادية اللي احنا أصبحنا فيها دلوقتي.
Their nonviolent tactics are tested immediately.
Day of demonstrations and the largest ever seen.
The protests began after midday prayers, which happened on Fridays.
Violent protests have been spreading. That curfew in place, we've seen
Provoked by deliberate violence from the police.
Air is thick with black smoke and tear gas causing a protest movement. They're calling this an open revolt to spread on social networking sites like
Cairo is in lockdown.
They are beating people in the streets. يعني نطلع فوق. تعال فوق.
They are prevented by police from getting to Tahrir Square. They are forced up the side roads. The police in hot pursuit. It becomes a standoff. But more protesters arrive. The police can't guard every access route. Then, everything stops for prayers. The police turn their backs, a gesture of respect. But once prayers are over, the pushing and shoving picks back up. And then they break through to Tahrir Square. Cairo seems like a war zone. April 6th headquarters becomes a makeshift clinic.
التحرير مدين للأمن علقة سخنة جدا. قال لك زادوا عن 20,000 كمان في التحرير.
In the beginning, it is only burned eyes and smoke inhalation.
مش تجمعات، اتنينات كده مع بعض. بس لو احنا رايحين التحرير بقى الناس حضراتكم جهزوا لنا حاجات زي كده. خلي بقى بصوا وشوفوا اللي انتوا عندكم ايه، الدنيا تحت بيطلقوا حاجات غريبة. هم مبهدلين الشباب، هم ضرب مباشر في جسم الشباب.
انتفاضة شعب للسوق ماشي، أطفال صغيرين ما بين 9 لغاية الناس عندهم 50 سنة نازلين يقولوا يسقط النظام يسقط حسني مبارك، بس هي غير منظمة وضاربين عليهم رصاص وبيرد عليهم.
Soon, it resembles an emergency room. Without mobile phones or the internet, they rely on rumors.
مفيش كنيسة اللي بيقولوا بيحموا الكنايس، مفيش كنيسة.
ايوه محدش قاصد بس المكان مفتوح، محدش
حزب الوطن.
حزب الوطن لا الحزب الوطن جوه. السيدة زينب الاسم مفيش حاجة. الاسم ده مش كوبري، هو اسم البابا يولع.
And his followers they are being beaten in Giza Square, and some news about 4,000 soldiers from the army are in the streets.
In the square, the crowds are growing and the tension is mounting. back at the April 6th headquarters, they need to know what's going on. So someone buys a satellite dish and TV. That night, they watched the national headquarters of the ruling party burn. And then a pivotal moment. The army is now on the streets. The police have been completely withdrawn. The protesters are delighted. They're counting on the army to be on their side. They head out into the night, determined to protect Tahrir Square and the safety of protesters sleeping there. And now they have gained the support of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's been less than a week since the first protests in the square. Despite the violence, hundreds of thousands came as the world watched. The people continued to clamor for change. Ahmed Mar wants to make sure April 6th plays a role in that change. They hold a press conference. A reporter asks how long they intend to keep protesters in the square.
لحد ما يتم تشكيل حكومة إنقاذ وطني ملهاش أي علاقة بالسلطة الموجودة دلوقتي. المتظاهرين لو مشوا من ميدان التحرير هيكون مخرج كبير جدا للنظام أو لمبارك إن هو يعيد فرض سيطرته تاني.
Mar confirms that there will have to be some sort of alliance with the army.
بعض الضباط جوه الجيش ده كان يوم السبت اللي فات وعرضوا إن هم ممكن يساندونا. ولكن القوى السياسية عملت صلات سريعة ببدعي وأيمن نور ومعظم الشخصيات السياسية ولكن فضلوا إن هو يكون الحديث مع القيادة المركزية للجيش مش مع أحد الفروع في الجيش يعني.
أنني أتوجه بحديث اليوم.
They watch as President Mubarak finally addresses the nation on state television.
إنني لم أكن يوما طالب سلطة أو جاه.
He was unwilling to relinquish power. The reaction is to take to the streets.
في العند واتنين دكتوراه في ان احنا هنفضل في ميدان التحرير لغايه لما يمشي. مش هنمشي مش هنمشي هو هيمشي.
Not long after that, military police raided the April 6th headquarters. Pictures appeared on the internet of the trashed offices. Producer Elizabeth Jones was briefly detained, and the 15 activists who were there at the time were arrested and taken away. In the days that followed, we lost track of Ahmed Mar. He and April 6 were in the thick of it with the crowd. After 18 days, President Hosni Mubarak resigned. During the cleanup, we found Ahmed Mar, surrounded by reporters.
I mean, what are the achievements and what more needs to be done now?
أهم حاجة إن الشعب صحي، دي أهم نقطة. لو كانت حصل تغيير نخبوي والشعب لسه نايم ما كانش يبقى تغيير، لكن الشعب صحي وعارف حقه وعارف إزاي يطالب بحقه وعارف قوته. الشعب أقوى من الأمن المركزي.
In the days that followed, new protests spread through the Middle East. In Yemen, Bahrain, in Jordan, Iraq, in Iran, and Libya.
Already, the activists in Egypt are reaching out to friends and peers in neighboring countries. The fact that the people have finally put their foot down and said, enough is enough. In Egypt, of all places over there, supposedly stable Egypt. This is a huge message for US policy and for residents of other parts of the region.
Next on this special edition of Frontline, correspondent Charles Sennett of Global Post probes who's in charge of the Muslim Brotherhood.
It is the young members which are telling the old guard what to do, and they are trying to catch up, and they are not catching up.
Does America understand the Muslim Brotherhood?
The U.S. doesn't understand the Muslim Brotherhood, at least not yet.
The Brothers begins right now.
Egypt's revolution may have been ignited by young, secular activists. But there was another powerful force at work behind the scenes of the uprising, the long outlawed Muslim Brotherhood. Day 11. They opened this prayer rally on Tahrir Square with a moment of silence for those who died the previous day in battles with pro-Mubarak vigilantes. Many of the fallen were Muslim brothers. Afterwards, they were all praised for their perseverance and unity.
في حركتكم التي جاءت بآداب لم يعرفها العالم الغربي، آداب إسلامية.
Anyone who's covered Egypt for years knows about the Brotherhood's profound influence on Egyptian society. Coming back at this extraordinary time, I wanted to find out what part they were playing in this revolution.
Hi, I'm Charles. Nice to meet you.
On Tahrir Square, I found Mohammed Abbas, a leader of the Muslim Brotherhood's youth wing. For the past month, Abbas had been working alongside secular activists from the April 6th movement to help organize the revolt. He was eager to show us what he and his fellow brothers had contributed.
هنا عند عمر مكرم ده مدخل من مداخل ميدان التحرير مدخل كوبري قصر النيل.
It was not until 3 days into the protest that the Muslim Brotherhood's senior leadership officially threw their weight behind the revolt. Now the brothers were running the security checkpoints, serving hot tea, distributing blankets, printing posters, and running an emergency health clinic. They call themselves the Brothers, in Arabic the Ikhwan, and they have decades of experience providing social services to Egypt's poor. They became key to holding the revolution's infrastructure together.
We have the ability and the good ability to organize.
Yes, definitely.
We are the best in Egypt to organize.
The organization of the space is in the Brotherhood's hand. They have managed to get the...
Amr Hamzawi is an expert on Arab political movements.
And it's not only garbage collection, tea, cups, and so on and so forth. It's even the one microphone, or the two microphones which we have to address the crowd. They are owned by the Muslim Brotherhood, which is an attest to the strong organizational skills of the movement. Not only that, in fact, those who defended the demonstrators on Tuesday and Wednesday were Ikhwan members in Tahrir against thugs of the Egyptian regime.
Our camera caught this firsthand as crowds of pro-Mubarak demonstrators arrived at the edges of Tahrir Square. Soon, fights broke out. When things turned violent, it was young Muslim brothers who pushed the regime's supporters back. The origins of the movement go back over 80 years. The Muslim Brotherhood was founded by an Egyptian school teacher, Hassan al-Banna. His answer for Egypt's problems became their motto: Islam is the solution.
It began in Egypt in 1928. This group began the first modern extremist organization in the Islamic world.
The Brotherhood took aim at foreign targets. An early bombing campaign struck at occupying British troops. They also flirted with German fascism. In the 1950s, President Nasser refused to let them form a political party and jailed and tortured Brotherhood members. Head of Egyptian internal security for 25 years was General Fuad Alam.
الإخوان المسلمين كانت بتستهدف الوصول إلى الحكم في مصر مدعية أنها تسعى إلى إقامة ما يسمى بالدولة الإسلامية. لما كانت الجماعات الإرهابية بتحاول أن هي تستخدم العنف عندما يقدم رجال الأمن على القبض عليهم، أمر اللي ترتب عليه قتل بعض هذه العناصر.
In the 1970s, President Sadat eased up on repression, but the movement split. Some members left to join groups like Ayman al-Zawahiri's Islamic Jihad, responsible for Sadat's assassination in 1981.
We tried our best to establish this Islamic State.
Zawahiri later joined forces with Osama bin Laden. The mainstream leadership said it would commit itself to a democratic process.
Their position was that we will not use violence. We want to take part in the political process. We believe in pluralism, and we want to be included.
They fielded candidates in Egypt's 2005 elections, running as independents. The party was still officially outlawed.
They are outlawed in that they're not allowed to form a legal political party because Egypt does not recognize political parties based on religion.
But after they won 88 seats in the parliament, Mubarak cracked down on the movement. He closed hundreds of Brotherhood schools and clinics, seized assets of their financial backers, and jailed over 1,200 members and supporters. After years of repression, many of the Ikhwan are used to operating in the shadows. Even days into the revolt, members were still being arrested. This man asked us to keep his identity secret, even while he showed me his website, Ikhwanophobia.
We at Ikhwanophobia.com are determined to shed light on the accusations and allegations against the Muslim Brotherhood.
The website is dedicated to changing their image.
Face of moderate Islamists. This is our message to the American people.
They are obsessed by their treatment in the Western media.
The media coverage in the United States are trying to say that the Islamists have the same face. They doesn't separate between Al-Qaeda or Muslim Brotherhood or even Hezbollah. What we are trying to say in Ikhwanophobia, that the Muslim Brotherhood are different. And the American
But the negative image of the Brotherhood has been carefully controlled by the Mubarak regime.
إن خيطا رفيعا يفصل بين الحرية والفوضى وإنني
On January 28th, Mubarak alluded to those fears in his first television address of the crisis.
آرائهم أتمسك بذات القدر بالحفاظ على أمن مصر واستقرارها وبعدم الانجراف بها وبشعبها لمنزلقات خطيرة.
Throughout the protests, the Brotherhood was fearful that the regime would succeed in portraying the revolution as a Muslim Brotherhood conspiracy. We saw this sensitivity play out when this man approached our camera holding up his pocket Quran. Muhammad Abbas took him aside and told him to put it away. Abbas then explained to me what was going on.
Egyptian not want to make this evolution take Muslim Brotherhood right show.
You want him out of here?
No. We don't want him out. We don't want him don't show the ideology on the press because it's so bad.
They may be playing down their role, but the real question is, what are their long-term intentions? I went looking for some people who know the Brotherhood. Muhammad Kamal is one of the more moderate leaders of Mubarak's National Democratic Party. The party's headquarters were gutted by fire in the early days of the uprising.
Many in America fear Islamist movements. Are their fears grounded or are they irrational?
Well, I think some members of the Muslim Brotherhood have fundamentalist view of the world and of Egypt for that matter. They will try to use the democratic mechanisms to come to power, and once in power, they're gonna restructure the whole state to fit their ideology, and I don't think they will leave power afterward, and Egypt might become a second Iran. But there are others also who, especially from the young generation, who wants to be part of a modern state, a modern civil state. So the Muslim Brotherhood is not a homogeneous organization.
Does America understand the Muslim Brotherhood?
The U.S. doesn't understand the Muslim Brotherhood, at least not yet. There are a lot of misconceptions.
Shadi Hamid is a political analyst.
Is very important. I think one mistake that a lot of Western observers make is they look at it as a fundamentally political organization, that this is a group that wants to come to power. It's much more complicated than that. The Brotherhood doesn't yet know what it wants. What does it mean to be an Islamist party, not just in opposition, but also in government?
Day 13. There were reports of pro-Mubarak vigilantes beating up journalists. It took an hour to get across town to attend a Muslim Brotherhood press conference. These men represent the Brotherhood's old guard. The revolution took them by surprise. Through our interpreter, I asked them if they were setting a deadline for the president to leave. While they said they supported the protests, they explained they were engaging in a dialogue with the regime, something the youth wing of the Brotherhood staunchly opposed. The old guard was clearly way out of sync with their younger colleagues on the square.
Those who are out there at the Tahrir Square have in fact moved beyond the movement. It is the young members which are stating and telling, informing the old guard what to do. And the old guard, they are trying to catch up, and they are not catching up.
younger Muslim brothers and sisters are questioning the older regime. And it's almost like a microcosm of what's happening in Egyptian society at large, in that you see the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood is this kind of old, often out of touch men, old out of touch men, much like the Mubarak regime is old out of touch men.
I went back to the square looking for Mohammed Abbas. I wanted to know where he thought the youth wing was taking the movement.
Mohammed Abbas. Mohammed Abbas, I believe that he may be asleep now. Sleeping. I don't know where is he exactly. Okay.
As it turned out, he was praying.
The message with these young activists is not a conventional Ikhwan message.
I was told the youth embrace a more modern interpretation of Islam's role in society than their elders.
I mean, this is not about Islam as a solution or about full implementation of the Sharia. This is not about Islamizing Egyptian society. No, what they are saying up until now is democratize Egypt, equal citizenship rights. They are trying to open up the system.
Is this the real Muslim Brotherhood? Or is it just a facade for now?
I don't think anyone knows right now, and I would really distrust anyone who at this moment in history, which is unprecedented in Egypt's recent history, can tell us, what fundamentally the Brotherhood is. The Brotherhood has a lot of different forces within it. I don't believe the very simplistic narrative that the government has sold the West and has sold the Egyptian people over the past years. That narrative is that the Muslim Brotherhood is waiting for one opportunity to get into power, to break off the Camp David agreement, to turn Egypt into Iran. Too simplistic.
But others are worried.
Now they are like a big crowd between us.
This law student, Ahmed, has been in the square since the beginning, after reading a notice on Facebook. Now he feels his revolution has been hijacked.
So you were here on the 25th and you saw a change here. Tell me about that.
I'm afraid.
What are you afraid of?
The brothers, the Islamic brothers.
You're afraid of the Muslim Brotherhood?
Yeah.
Why?
They want it to be Islamic, like Iran and this. But we don't want it to be like that. We are liberal. That's the way we think. But they have the biggest crowd in here. That's why they can control it easily.
And do you feel they really have taken control?
Yeah.
When I caught up with Mohammed Abbas again, he said he wanted to stay focused on their immediate goals. He said the brothers are not trying to take over the revolution. He insisted the brothers were just one part of a diverse, democratic political movement. But when you listen to someone like Brotherhood spokesman Assam Al-Aryan, you hear something different.
Our goal, our most important mission is to have an Islamic revival in the society, to convince people that you can build a new country, a new era, according to your Islamic beliefs.
So are you saying that those desires to create an Islamic society are more important than your own political gains?
We have not only a political group. We are an Islamic organization. Islam deals with politics, with economics, with social affairs, with solidarity of people, with their education, with all aspects of life.
Is this a revolution?
Yes, it is a revolution. It is one of the most important historical revolutions. It will be enlisted and encountered as French Revolution, Russian Revolution.
Day 17. Protests had spread across Cairo.
Do you think the United States is actually going to engage with the Muslim Brotherhood?
I think the U.S. doesn't have a choice anymore. The U.S. has to learn to live with political Islam. The Brotherhood is likely going to play an influential role in the coming years. If Egypt becomes democratic, the largest opposition force in the country is going to be part of that new political scene. So this is going to be really one of the first real experiments in Islamist governance in Egypt. So the U.S. has to find a way to be okay with that.
By nightfall on February 10th, it seemed the end was near. Throughout the protest, the Egyptian army had remained neutral and kept to its pledge not to fire on demonstrators. Early on, they had taken up positions around the square to shield the protesters from Mubarak's supporters. Now they seemed to be taking sides. A general had come to the square and said the people's demands were about to be met. The palace announced Mubarak would go live to the nation at 10 p.m. The square was filled with people in anticipation. There was a wedding. When I found Mohammed Abbas again, he had shaved off his beard.
How do you feel? How do you feel?
Nothing is better than this. Nothing in all my life better than this time. I can't explain what I feel because it's over an imagine.
Then came Mubarak's speech.
الأبناء شباب مصر وشاباتها أتوجه بحديث اليوم لشباب مصر بميدان التحرير حديث الأب لأبنائه وبناته أقول لكم.
In a long and rambling address, it soon became clear he was not stepping down.
أعلنت تمسكي بذلك وأعلنت تمسكا مماثلا.
Confusion turned to anger.
حتى يتم تسليم السلطة والمسؤولية.
The people held up their shoes in disgust.
شهر سبتمبر المقبل في انتخابات حرة ونزيهة.
They were stunned and betrayed. That's when Mohammed Abbas took the microphone. He urged the army to finish the job. Within 24 hours, Mubarak was gone. The revolution was over. The revolution had just begun. The spirit of unity was strong enough after 18 long days to bring people back to Tahrir Square to clean up after themselves. But how long will this unity last?
I'm hoping that the experience of the square will be one which will transform society optimistically. That would be my hope. I also realize slightly more realistically that this experience remains confined to the square, and that there are many people outside the square who aren't experiencing this political moment. And there is a possibility that things could go very wrong in terms of what the protesters hope for.
I saw Abbas one more time. He was proud of how the young brothers had shown the old guard how to run a revolution.
كان عندنا قناعة دائمة بالصبر على الحدوث والتضحية، لكن احنا نقلنا نقل نوعية ونقلة تماما، غيرنا تغيير جذري، مش هنقول نقلنا، غيرناها تغيير جذري لاستراتيجية التغيير. يوم 18 يوم في الميدان بدون ما نرفع أي شعار إسلامي، ده ما حصلش قبل كده.
I followed him to Al Jazeera, where he talked about ongoing negotiations with the military. Afterwards, in a cafe, I had a couple more important questions.
What is the future of how the Muslim Brotherhood will deal with Israel, and will it recognize the treaty that's been signed?
أعلن الإخوان في أكثر من موقف أنهم ملتزمون بالمعاهدات المصرية. نحن لسنا أوصياء على الشعب كي نختار معاهدة أو إلغائه. الشعب يختار، إذا أراد الشعب إبقاء على المعاهدة فبقيت المعاهدة، إذا أراد الشعب إلغائها ألغيت المعاهدة بكل بساطة.
Okay, and so does the Muslim Brotherhood think Israel has the right to exist?
كان أرد عليك برد بسيط جدا في الموضوع ده. أنا لو دخل عندي حرامي في البيت وقال لي أنا هاخد الأوضة دي منك ومش هديها لك، هل من العدل إننا نعترف بدولة زي دي؟
Leaving Cairo, one wants to be hopeful after these extraordinary days. But there's lots of cause for worry. As the Brotherhood comes out of the shadows to take their place at the table, no one knows who will emerge in their leadership. Whoever it is, though, will most certainly determine the future of Egypt, and perhaps beyond.
Frontline's website has more on tonight's stories.
They're telling me to stay in because it gets violent and they're throwing rocks.
A web-exclusive report on the uprising through the eyes of a young activist.
This is like war. I waited for this day for a long time.
And there's much more on Frontline's website. Watch nearly 100 programs from our archive, explore interactive timelines and maps, and follow ongoing Frontline investigations. Then tell us what you think at pbs.org. For more on this and other Frontline programs, visit our website at pbs.org. Frontline's Revolution in Cairo is available on DVD. To order, visit shoppbs.org or call 1-800-PLAY-PBS.